Hello and welcome to In the Channel from channelbuzz.ca, bringing news and information to the Canadian IT channel community for the last 16 years. I'm Robert Dutt, editor at channelbuzz.ca and your host for the show. We've been on a bit of an unscheduled hiatus, but we're back. We're going to get back into the swing of things right now, and we're going to start that off by finishing our coverage of this year's HPE Discover 2026. Today's guest is Curtis Dery, Executive Vice President at Xerox IT Solutions Canada, which most of the channel still knows as Powerland. Curtis is based in Winnipeg, but his team covers the country. He's been living the HPE GreenLake story since before most Canadian partners knew what as-a-service infrastructure meant. His team won HPE Canada's GreenLake Partner of the Year back in 2022 and has kept that streak alive. They were the first partner to sell a GreenLake deal in Canada, the first to sell VM Essentials, and the first to sell a CyberVault. But Curtis isn't just a sales exec. He's genuinely hands-on with emerging technology, running internal AI hackathons with his team, and has a perspective on the announcements from Discover that come from actually closing the deals, not just reading the press releases. He joined me on site at Discover to talk about what the new financing tools, the channel-only expansion, and the AI story mean for partners on the ground. Let's get right into it. My chat with Curtis Dery. Curtis, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into this week, I have to acknowledge just having been in this industry a while, and you've got Xerox and what is formerly HP at a conference here, slightly unexpected combination at the service. You know, most people's mental model of Xerox is still in copiers, but you were running Powerland as one of the leading HPE infrastructure providers in Canada long before that. What does the Xerox relationship mean in practice for the IT business? You know, has it changed how you go to market with HPE, or does Powerland essentially operate in its own lane?
No, you know what? That's a great question. I mean, the way the market's changing, the industry is changing, businesses are needing to change, and that was the reason why Xerox looked at acquiring us to help go through the reinvent and the changes that they're making as a business. Obviously, you know, from a print perspective, you know, looking at what that industry and challenges it was going through. Obviously through COVID and post-COVID and just the market shift around that, you know, having, you know, a focus around infrastructure and, you know, technology and driving those outcomes with our customers. It's helped us amplify the customer base that they have across North America.
You were doing GreenLake before a lot of Canadian partners knew what it was. You know, you won the Canadian GreenLake Partner of the Year back in 22, closing deals in the as a service model when it was still a pretty hard sell to customers used to buying it right. Now HP's on stage talking about, you know, 90-9 financing and offering 150% expansion of credit lines. For someone who's been engineering these deals since the beginning, you know, what do these tools mean specifically? Do they change what's possible for you, or are you kind of already have your system set up and ready to go?
Yeah, I mean, being fortunate to be, you know, a little bit of the front edge of GreenLake, we're fortunate to be, you know, Partner of the Year 4 years in a row, and from a North American perspective, Partner of the Year to make it 5. So, you know, what that created was just validation that how we're going to market and how we're executing it a little bit more uniquely than others, and how we're prepared to, you know, understand the customer, the outcomes that they want, and wrap that around, you know, operationalizing it through a GreenLake model. You know, having flexibility in some of these announcements helps, you know, with the challenges that we're all entering, right? Some of it unknown, some of it, you know, shortages, all these changes, and then you wrap that around, obviously, the disruption of AI. So having these flexibilities of what they want to do around credit, you know, is definitely needed because customers are facing constraints financially, right? Just with the cost of, you know, from a geopolitical and impact perspective, tariffs, all these things are real, right? So, you know, HP coming to the table with new offerings helps open more doors and close deals even sooner than, you know, expected sometimes. So we're always looking at making sure, yes, we have a foundational core that we can execute on with a rinse and repeat with a proven track record, but always making sure we're aligned with the changes that they're making and making sure that we're enhancing our offering with them, you know, a walk and step together, right?
It feels like they're acknowledging that, you know, sort of one of the barriers to GreenLake adoption isn't the technology, the concept, or anything like that. It's the customer's budget cycles. And it sounds like you're saying that's the right diagnosis from what you're seeing in the Western Canada market.
Yeah. And I think, you know, also people sometimes thinking it has to be operational. There's a balance that you can still capitalize GreenLake as well too. And then, do a churn top up, depending on the utilization they had, but also operationalizing it from a financial. So its flexibility is still there. I just seeing sometimes that message isn't out there at the street level. So, and that's where our value comes in as a partner, right? To understand where that noise and friction is and remove the friction.
3 products went to channel only at Partner Go Summit this week with Private Cloud, PC3000, PC1000, and Zerto. Last year it was VM Essentials. It seems like it's clearly a deliberate expansion of that strategy from where you sit with that, infrastructure heavy book of business. Is channel only a meaningful strategic signal for you, or is it about filling the gaps for customers who need DR and private cloud but haven't had a clean vehicle to buy it through you?
That's a great question. I think, fortunate to have a strategic partnership with HP. We sold the first, cyber vault in the country, and so same with VME, we sold the first in the country, and same with GreenLake. So there's a theme there, right? Being so strategically aligned with them from an executive level down to a technical level. I'm on their advisory council from a GreenLake perspective. My pre-sales engineers, the ambassador on the GreenLake program. Because of that exposure, we get line of sight a little bit earlier. So then we're already preparing on how we're going to market to augment some of these announcements that they're doing. And then wrapping around our own little secret sauce to that to be able to then, expedite the sales and making sure that we're taking down the logos together.
What is their secret sauce in whatever depth you wish to share that in this forum?
Well, I think sometimes, getting down to the nitty gritty of what GreenLake really does, and that's operationalizing the customer's process to be able to allow them to be more agile within their own business. So instead of going to, a traditional market and doing a traditional way of getting quotes, going to an RFP process, all those things take time, money, and energy. And when you do that, you then don't have time to focus on the business to drive the outcomes you can do. Now, with our customers from a GreenLake perspective, that agility of, being able to streamline that process, we have our customers that are able to go from 20 to 30 projects a year to now 50 to 70 projects a year. So then they get to see the benefits of how fast we can make their business move, get the outcomes that they want so they can start to accelerate further.
You heard the partner branded services announcement this week. Curious what you thought of that and how it kind of maps with what you do in terms of, are you already running that services led model, or are you looking for opportunities to have HP back you up but still go under your brand? Just curious how it hit.
Yeah, for us, it definitely hit, but yes, we also do it as well that way. But again, it's the right tool at the right place at the right time. And sometimes we may need them, they may need us, or it's an augmentation of both. And that's the beauty that I love about HP is the investment to the channel, always staying aligned at the street level and making sure it's very predictable on how you can make bets jointly with them.
So it's a flexibility thing.
100%.
Curious what's kind of driving the HPE business for you right now. What's kind of hitting, what are customers talking to you about, what's driving it forward? I have to imagine AI is a big part of that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I think, AI was a little bit of paralysis in the market, right? People were frozen of like, what do I do? Where do I start? What type of technology? Do I go to a public LLM? Or, you hear this word sovereign, and what does that mean? And I think, the perfect storm's brewing, but the beauty is that HP's made the right investments, right, acquisitions to now truly be ready for what the market's going to be hitting with right now, which is, you look at the announcement of what happened with Anthropic last week, government oversight, they said, shut down that model. Well, if I'm a customer and I'm all in on that model, what would happen, right? And so this created that validation of why private sovereign AI with HP wrapping around customers' data and giving them real hardened AI outcomes within their environment, and then choosing if they need to go into the public LLM. And so getting ready for that market condition is what's going to drive success and velocity with HP in the market.
Along with the idea of tokenomics, that idea of AI getting stuck in, and maybe hand in hand with tokenomics, in fact, that idea of AI projects getting stalled out in the implementation or the proof of concept phase and not getting to full implementation is a theme that we're hearing from HP and from just about any vendor who's playing in the space this year. It seems to be one of the big catches. I'm curious how you're seeing that reflected in your customer base, if they're kind of getting to a point of doing POCs and then starting to discover, well, wait a second, this could get real expensive real fast.
1000%, right? The burn is real, right? We have customers that, knew that they have to start getting their battle scars and learning, from the AI and understanding how does it work? How do we integrate it? How do we make sure there's no hallucinating? How do we trust it? How do we do all these different things? My analogy I like to use is, at the end of the day, we all need refrigerators, but a lot of people probably don't remember who invented the refrigerator. They just know they needed one, right? That's the same with the public LLMs, right? You need the refrigerator when you need to go into it. What we do with our customers is show them how to take a Coke can and put it in the fridge and bring it out of the fridge. And so we help them navigate it. So then tokenomics is not exposed as much, right? They can manage their costs, manage their environment, and choose where they want to put their data. I think the tokenomics is definitely a real thing. And I think we're going to find out significantly what that means in the next 120 days. Why? Because these companies are going IPO and you now know where the math is mathing, right? And so that's going to show us a lot on what the true tokenomics looks like.
You touched a little bit on the importance of sovereignty in customer discussions, but can you tell me a little bit more about how that's showing up in terms of what customers are asking about and how you see that trending and evolving as an interest and a care about both on the geopolitical front and as you say on an issue like Anthropic suddenly having to pull access to the latest model?
Yeah, 1,000%. I think, when you hear the word sovereign, I always ask people, what does that mean to you? Because, when you look at World Economic Forum, for example, in February, what did they announce as the next pandemic? The cyber pandemic. Why? You got scale of agents running everywhere. People don't know what is a good agent or a bad agent, right? And if you look at the internet bandwidth since December till now, it's increased over 12x of volume. So you know how much traffic is now coming down. So now people are going to need to get prepared of like, how do you control your network, your data, your access, and sovereign that so that you're secure so that if a bad day occurs, you don't have the public exposure. And that's why you hear from Antonio Neri and stuff, the focus around the network. How do you optimize that network? How do you secure that traffic and have the access to where you need to go and ensure that it can handle the scale? So that's why this storm is brewing in front of all of us right now.
Mm-hmm. Looking at your background, it's clear that you're not just selling infrastructure. You're genuinely interested in AI and emerging technology, and it seems like you like to get pretty hands-on. As you're at an event like this and you're hearing the announcements and seeing what's coming and what they're talking about, what are you really excited to get your hands on and play with and beyond that, to actually get in front of your customers, either now or down the road as it becomes more concrete?
I tell people this is probably the most exciting time in any of our careers because it's the first time in any of our careers that it's a level playing field for the first time where it's up to you to grab the baton of AI and understand how do you use it, apply it, and get the outcomes and innovation that you want to do with people. The tagline I like to use with my team internally is we're not underpinned by anyone anymore. We have the opportunity to dream, to build, and execute, and we can use AI technology to do that. And so I call it the digital gold mine. We get to go inside these LLMs and mine what we want out of that and be able to take advantage of what we can do with our customers. And that's the one thing I enjoy the most is understanding, okay, what tools can I use, whether it's from PCAI and apply, our own private AI strategy around that. I work with a lot of advisory around a lot of the latest LLMs that are out there, but also some of these private ones like Marriott.ai and understanding how it's a puppet master to the public AI and how to optimize white space within a customer's environment to show them where they have inefficiencies, profitability, when they can take the market in a different way. And that's what AI does is allow customers to be agile, at edge, on time, and be able to really disrupt if they choose to. And I think, it sounds a lot daunting for a lot of people, right? To understand how do I get proactive now with AI, not get disrupted by it because you don't know if you can wake up and all of a sudden your competitor is something that you didn't expect, right? And so I think being able to just dive in and learn. A lot of people say, well, I don't know much about AI. None of us do. This is all the latest technology, right? So I tell people, speak to it, learn from it, and just start understanding how it works. So then at the end of the day, you can now augment it because it ain't going away, right? If you think about from a generational perspective, we have kids that are going to be born in AI. They don't even understand what that means, right? So, it's exciting times. And I tell people embrace it because like I said, it's the first time in history that nobody's really walking in a room saying, I got 10 years in AI. Everyone's like, hey, I've been working with it for 6 months. Cool. Just like all of us, right? It's just how many people are putting in the reps with it, right?
What are you pulling out of that gold mine so far at Powerland? What are you doing in terms of both? How's AI changing both what you're doing customer facing and internally your own operations and how you think about AI within the org?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we were fortunate, being ahead of it from an AI perspective and understanding our domain strengths, using AI to be better prepared for our customers and think through strategies with them. And with that, we were able to build out blueprints where we were fortunate to close out 4 of the largest deals in the world with 4 different vendors out of a city called Winnipeg. And a lot of people, came to me and said, Kurt, I don't get it. We're not doing this in New York, Toronto. You were doing this in Winnipeg. How are you doing this? And I'm like, using AI to get better prepared to understand how do we simulate an environment to say, this is the customer. What can we do to drive out these types of outcomes? And what does this look like from a strategy? We get the blueprint and now we go and sit with the customer and go, does this make sense? And they go, yes, well, let's go execute that with AI. And so that's the advantage that we get to do. And then from an internal perspective, I love having our own internal roundtable hackathons, right? What's something we want to do? Throw it on the whiteboard. Everybody has their AI account and go, okay, how would you approach that? So then our team's learning how to put those reps in to say, well, I would approach it this way. And it's a cool exercise to see how everyone thinks differently. And that's the beauty about AI, right? We're all going to prompt it differently. We're all going to work with it differently, and then take those unified approach of like everyone's pieces, put it together and go, okay, now we solve the puzzle together. So I really enjoy, the ability to be able to scale so rapidly with it. It's exciting time. I feel like we're built for this era.
And I'd imagine a lot of those ideas that are coming out in the internal hackathons are eventually going to find their way into what you're doing with customers as well. So that's a nice plus.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you point out, you're to Winnipeg, presence across Western Canada. I've talked to a couple of other Canadian partners this week, and I'm getting this consistent theme that Canadian customers right now are in their moment between sovereignty, between AI infrastructure refresh, between really starting to get AI in play rather than playing with AI. Does that map with what you're hearing from your customers in the Prairie and the West? And where do you see HPE fitting into that story for the balance of the year and beyond?
Yeah, I think, kind of we touched on it lightly, right? The changes that have happened, some like the government oversight last week, I think opened people's eyes on what their approach is to public LLMs. And then also, understanding costs, constraints, all these things that have been hitting our markets and hitting, customers' budgets and challenges. It's a difficult time to be a CIO right now when you're sitting there and you have to protect them from a cybersecurity perspective. You have to have, future of understanding where AI fits into this, and never mind constraints around cost and all that stuff. It's a tough time to be, an executive for a business right now and understand how you can be profitable, scale, all these things while you're facing all these challenges in the market. So being prepared in Canada of how we're going to our customers is understanding how to package what, HP's done effectively well on the overall strategy around GreenLake, and saying, how do we now enter the customer to say, you can now do on-demand AI in your environment, predictably, cost-effectively, compliance and govern, and now you can choose how you want to scale that rapidly. And I think finally we're starting to see that curve get around the corner where customers are jumping into wanting to do it this way. It's such a learning dynamic exercise right now, right? Because at first it was ChatGPT, and then it was, Grok, and then it was, Claude, and it just kept going and going. And, people are not talking about the disruption happening out of China too with their LLMs, right? So if you look at DeepSeek, Kimi, and all these models, they're doing exactly what Claude and these others can do at 75% cheaper. So when people start to realize, I can run that SDK, natively inside of my environment way cheaper than going to a public API Claude license, people are going to look at that and go, well, what makes sense now? Because the math ain't mathin'.
Yeah, that theme is coming up a lot in a lot of different places, isn't it? Last one for me, whether it's something we've already covered off or something else, what's kind of the one thing that's really caught your attention here at Discover this week, the thing that you're going to take back to the team and on Friday or Monday or whenever you're first in there saying,
yeah,
by the way, this is what I heard. This is what we got to get ready for. What?
Well, a few things, right? One is truly being prepared of the foundation of the network, right? And understanding what does that mean to have an optimized AI network, both internally and externally for the customer. And I think there's a high value in that. I learned that on the journey with cloud. Everybody wanted to go cloud, love the destination. Nobody talked about the highway to the cloud. Nobody talked about, the cloud tax of egress coming out of there, right? So there's a lot of lessons and best practices that came from the cloud journey that we can now reapply to the AI journey. So focusing on that is huge. And then understanding the intelligence layer and understanding, Morpheus is an extremely powerful tool, right? And understanding how does that fit into the entire, reference architectural stack with PCAI, and understanding how do we build on top of that. And that's, some of our secret sauce of what we're doing, being able to do our own private SDK on top of PCAI so customers can truly control their own AI platform. And so that's the focus that we're going to do. And we're super excited to, get velocity going into Q4 with HP so that, 2027, I expect a big year.
All right. Well, good luck on bringing that back to the team next week, and good luck on that big year. And thanks again for taking the time on what I'm sure has been a very busy week.
Absolutely. And, I welcome the time and being able to, share this conversation with you. So I look forward to doing it again.
There you have it. Curtis Dery from Xerox IT Solutions Canada. I'd like to thank Curtis for his time. If you're finding value in these interviews, I'd appreciate if you'd follow or subscribe to the show. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, most major podcast directories. Ratings and reviews are always welcome. Few things that stood out for me from this conversation. One is Curtis's framing that the real barrier to GreenLake adoption has never been the technology, it's the customer's budget cycle. The 90/9 financing and expanded credit lines aren't abstract partner program benefits. They're deal-closing tools for partners who are already in the room with constrained CIOs. Another is his digital goldmine metaphor for AI. The idea that for the first time in our careers, the playing field's level, and what matters is who's putting in the reps. But he's also refreshingly blunt about the burn on tokenomics and the need for partners to help customers manage costs as AI moves from proof of concept to production. And I appreciated his point about sovereignty not being theoretical anymore. The Anthropic incident gave customers a concrete reason to ask hard questions about public LLM dependence. Finally, it's worth noting that the company is closing some of the largest infrastructure deals in the world out of Winnipeg. The Canadian channel is not a Toronto-only story, and this is a reminder of that. Till next time, I'm Robert Dutt for channelbuzz.ca, and I'll see you in the channel.